What's an oh shit moment where you realized you've been doing something the wrong way for years? When I was 5, a Pizza Hut employee told me that the powder on the breadsticks was called fairy dust. Ordered extra fairy dust on my breadsticks until I was around 14 when an employee said back, quote, "Do you mean garlic salt?" It still devastates me to realize how obtuse I was. I worked at Pizza Hut from 16 to 21. We called it fairy dust. We bought a nice liquor cabinet. We got it delivered and noticed it was a bit shorter than we thought. No biggie. 3 years later, we are moving. Lift up cabinet and these beautiful ornate, screw-on legs, wrapped in tape and bubble wrap fall off the bottom. Looks so much better now. Reminds me of when my mum bought a new sofa. About 6 months later she's hoovering under the cushions when the base fabric pulls back to reveal some sort of metal and a mattress. Turns out we had a sofa bed. Made my friend sleep on the floor with a sofa bed right there. Until last week, when my father-in-law would made a phone call on his very basic non-touch screen flip phone. He would open the menu, scroll to the phone icon, open it, hit the soft key for contacts, scroll to the person he wanted to call, press OK, then press the soft key to call. When he mentioned how he preferred his landline because he could just dial the number, I said, humor me. Just dial the number and hit the talk button. I've never seen a man so simultaneously grateful and embarrassed. Couple years ago I was trying to open some toothpaste and had to break the seal of the tube. I used to look for something like a nail to break it. Then one day I looked at the pointy end of the cap and thought, what if I could use this to break it? And oh shit, it did fit and broke it effortless. And so did every other tube product I had in the house and their respective cap. My mind was blown. Edit. Changed dental paste to toothpaste since it sounds weird in English. I was cooking with my boyfriend a month or so ago and I was confused when he mentioned he hated opening tubes of tomato puree because I just find it satisfying. I then proceeded to stare at him in disbelief when he started trying to peel the tiny foil seal off the end of the tube. I just slowly reached out, picked the screw top cap off the counter and showed him the pointy bit. When I was a kid I loved drinking coffee but didn't know how to make it. My mom taught me, but the coffee ratio she told me to use was like 1 TBSP per 1 pot of coffee as opposed to the actual ratio 1 TBSP 1 cup of water. Fast forward about 13 years to a couple months ago and I was reading the back of my Folgers coffee thing and there was a little diagram showing how much to actually use. I then realized my mom had told me the wrong amount so I wouldn't drink all her coffee and B, wasn't super hyped up going into school. I lived in a house for 6 years with a bathroom with no shelf or cupboard to put toiletries into. I was very disappointed and ended up using a windowsill that was way too small to fit everything. Anyway, one day we had a friend over and he asked why we don't have anything in our bathroom cupboard. I was confused, so he showed me. It turns out that the mirror I had been using for 6 years has a hidden compartment behind it. It was a mirror door to a mounted cupboard on the wall. I was astonished and immediately moved all my stuff from the window into the new space. My friend was baffled that I had never figured out there was a space behind the mirror. There was an obvious gap between it and the wall that I somehow failed to notice. I grew up without a mom. She passed when I was 6. I was afraid to ask my dad how to put a tampon in. One day I made a comment about age 18 to some friends that tampons hang out too far out your bajingo and made me feel like I waddled when I walk. My friend asked me how I put them in. I thought it would get stuck up there and wasn't inserting it far enough. Did it wrong for about 5 years. My friends still make fun of me for it. I can't help but use the dead mom card, but looking back it's pretty common sense how to shove it up there. Edit. For all those asking, I didn't really feel comfortable with my body, so I'm not sure I really understood what the directions were asking. For others asking, my dad was a really good dad. Obviously he made some general mistakes as a parent, as all parents do, but as a substitute mother he did a great job. He taught me how to shave my legs, funny voices and all, and he was a Girl Scout troop leader for almost 10 years. He tried to figure out how to French braid, and he did comb my nasty ass ratty hair on a daily basis. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for popping my silver cherry. I owned a car with swivel headlights, and it was very nice to have that. Discovered 3 years in that I had never turned on the swivel feature. My uncle has a 2005 Lexus that has swivel lights. When the car turns off, they face down. The swivel motor broke in both headlights a few years ago and no longer turn up to face straight. He lives a few hours from me and I don't visit that often, so when I finally went to visit him, I pointed out the problem. He had been using his high beams full time at night for years because he thought the low beams just weren't good enough. When I first got a debit card and would go out to eat at restaurants with my friends, I would leave a cash tip on the table. When I got the receipt to put how much I was paying, I would write down how much money I left on the table. For at least 6 months I gave double tips to every waitress I had. Edit. Word. I did this to a pizza guy once. I gave him a cash tip, and when he gave me the receipt to sign, I put down how much cash tip I gave him. He told me, "Whoa, you're giving me more." I was like, "Is that not how it works?" He said he'd correct it for me once he got back to the store. I felt pretty embarrassed. My family always had a cup next to the bathroom sink in case you needed to rinse your mouth after brushing your teeth, or maybe get a quick drink of water in the middle of the night. My grandma had the same cup at her house. I used it for years whenever I was thirsty. One day she saw me doing this and said, "Don't use that cup. That's where grandma puts her teeth." One time me and my little cousin were brushing our teeth at the same time at my grandma's. She had to have been maybe 7-ish and grabbed the pink cup and took a sip before I could stop her, and the dentures came at her and her eyes got so big she just put the cup back and left the bathroom. Edit. Wow, thanks for the silver. I'm gonna tell her that the fake teeth coming for her has given me so many internet points, although she probably doesn't even remember. Living in a foreign country where I was actively learning the language. Social cues go a long way when learning a language on the spot. That being said, someone once said a phrase to me while serving a hot dish, which I assumed as meaning "excuse me." After going through crowds and lines, replicating the same phrase in an attempt to be respectful of those around me, I abruptly found out that the phrase actually meant enjoy. Hindsight completely makes sense. The odd looks I would get by saying enjoy while squeezing past people all of a sudden made sense. Edit. Wowzers, you'll really know how to make a grown man blush. Thanks for the gold and silver, you beautiful, beautiful strangers. I'm glad my mistakes bring such enjoyment and hilarity to the world. So this happened while I was living in Vietnam. The phrase was "Xin me." It was even more deceiving because it was similar to the phrase for sorry, which is "Xin li." That was year 1. The following 3 years were full of similar mistakes. Tonal languages are tough. My wife and I have this ceiling fan/light in our bedroom in the house we moved into 2 years ago. It has a remote control for the fan and lights. About a year and a half ago the lights suddenly stopped working. The fan works well, and we didn't have a ton of money, so we've just lived with lamps in the room, always being frustrated with how damn dark it is. I was scrolling some other thread on Tifu a few weeks ago, and the top post was a guy talking about how his lights stopped working years ago, and then he found out that it was just dimmed, which you do by holding down the button on the remote. It sounded so much like our fan I went and tried it. Dimmed. As a boy, I had an unconventional method for masturbating. It would require a diagram to get across all its subtleties, but let's just say that it required 2 hands, was not intuitive, and simulated no known sex act. It was suboptimal. After a year or so of convoluted self-abuse, one of the older kids made the international jerk-off hand gesture towards me. My jaw dropped. I instantly knew that I had been doing it wrong all that time. It was so simple, so obvious, way quieter, and way more effective. I tried it that night and never looked back. That dude changed my life. Thank you, Chris Eastman. Edit. None of the guesses are even remotely close. I used to think just reading the material was how everyone studied, so that's how I did it too. I never quite understood why my grades were so low. It'd be like I read the page, IDK what happened, until I saw my friend making flowcharts and summaries, and I was like, we don't have to do that, you know, and he was like, nah, I'm just studying. It blew my mind how much better my grades got. Edit. Bet you thought you were real original coming up with that username joke. Huh. Bet you thought it never heard it before. Huh. Well, who's not smart? No. Still me. Okay, yeah, I'll go home, sorry. Not cause I've been doing something wrong my entire life, but saw it wrong. I'm colorblind and my entire life I thought peanut butter was green until I turned 19. And when I found out it was brown my mind was blown. It took so long because no one really talks about the color of things like that. I went to a county fair when I was a kid and the brown cows were in a barn with crappy yellow sodium lights. Those cows were as green as Irish grass to my eye. My parents thought I was nuts going